My name is Clara Mayfield, and at 36 years old, I had built an empire in silence, a tech company most people in my life, especially my family, knew nothing about. I was driving back to my childhood home for Christmas dinner, the first I'd attended in 7 long years, and my stomach was a tangled mess of knots. My father, Arthur, had never hidden his preference for my brothers, Victor and Graham, but nothing could have prepared me for the bombshell he was about to drop at dinner. When he announced I was being cut out of the family inheritance, I simply gave a small nod and continued eating. Little did any of them know what was about to unfold. If you're watching this right now, please do me a favor and hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from as I take you through a night that would reshape my family forever. I grew up in Crestwood, a quaint town in Pennsylvania where everybody's business was everybody's business. Our family home was a grand colonial-style house on Elm Avenue, the kind of place that made the neighbors assume you were swimming in money. And to a degree, we were. My father, Arthur, had built a successful custom furniture manufacturing business from the ground up, a fact he never tired of reminding us. From my earliest memories, the hierarchy in our household was crystal clear. My brothers, Victor and Graham, were destined to take over Mayfield Sons from the moment they could walk. Victor, 3 years my senior, was the analytical one, a natural with numbers. Graham, 2 years my junior, possessed the charm and people skills. And then there was me, the middle child, the daughter who never quite fit into my father's blueprint for success. The business world is a man's world, Clara. My father would often say whenever I showed even a flicker of interest in the company, "You should be focusing on finding a good husband who can take care of you." This was the early 2000s, not the 1950s, but my father's views on gender roles were stuck in a time warp. My mother, Helen, would offer me sympathetic glances but never once dared to contradict him. She belonged to a generation of women taught to stand in their husband's shadow, never beside them. School became my sanctuary. It was the one place where I excelled, particularly in mathematics and computer science. While my brothers were at football games or being paraded at business dinners with my father, my real home was the computer lab, where I'd stay late with Mr. Davies, my high school teacher who first sparked my passion for coding. "You have a real gift, Clara," Mr. Davies told me during my senior year. "The world is changing. Technology is the future, and you have the mind to be one of its architects." When college application season rolled around, I had my heart set on MIT. Their computer science program was legendary, and the Boston area was a burgeoning hub for innovation. I poured my soul into my application, and when the thick acceptance letter finally arrived, I was over the moon. My father was not. MIT in Massachusetts? That's absurd. "The family business is here," he scoffed when I presented him with the letter. "Besides, have you any idea how much a school like that costs?" Oh, I knew. I had spent countless nights poring over scholarship applications and financial aid forms, but there was still a substantial gap. After being rejected for a crucial scholarship, I finally had to go to my father for help. We were in his study, a room steeped in the scent of cedar and old leather, dominated by dark wood. Seated behind his massive desk, he looked like a king about to pass judgment. "Your brothers need to focus on their business degrees to prepare for taking over the company," he explained, his tone final. "That's where the family money needs to be invested. This computer thing of yours is just a hobby." "It's not a hobby, Dad. It's what I want to do with my life," I pleaded. "Well, you'll have to find a way to pay for it yourself," he said, his eyes already returning to his paperwork. The conversation was officially over. His refusal was the only motivation I needed. I deferred my admission for a year and threw myself into work, juggling 3 jobs. I was a waitress during the morning rush, worked retail in the afternoons, and did bookkeeping for local shops late into the night. I saved every single dollar, took out every student loan I could find, and finally, I made it to MIT the following fall. Those college years were a brutal grind. While my classmates were enjoying the full college experience, I was always rushing between classes and side jobs to make ends meet. I ran on coffee and about 4 hours of sleep a night, especially during finals. But I graduated with honors and, more importantly, with the skills and network I needed to break into the tech world. My first job was at a small startup in Boston. The salary was barely enough to live on, but the education I got was invaluable. I worked side by side with the founders, soaking up everything I could about building a business from the ground up. When that startup was acquired 2 years later, I had enough savings and a head full of ideas to start dreaming of my own venture. Meanwhile, back in Crestwood, Victor and Graham had settled into their executive roles at Mayfield Sons. Every phone call with my mother was a highlight reel of their latest accomplishments and my father's overflowing pride. I was genuinely happy for my brothers, I truly was, but the glaring difference in how our professional paths were valued was a constant, dull ache. The final straw came during a short visit home about 10 years ago. I had just launched my first company, Innovate Med, a platform that used artificial intelligence to improve surgical outcomes. We were pre-revenue, running on a shoestring budget and venture capital, and I was working 20-hour days to get it off the ground. During a family dinner, much like the one I was now driving toward, my father had asked about my little computer project in that same dismissive tone. "Actually, we just closed our Series A funding round," I said, attempting to convey the milestone's significance. "Series A? What on earth does that even mean?" My father cut in. "Real businesses make products and profits, Clara, not fancy slideshows for investors." Victor chuckled. "Dad has a point. When are you going to get a real job?" "This is a real job," I retorted, my voice tight. "The technology we're building could literally save lives." "Well, when you're done playing entrepreneur and you're ready to come back to reality, there might be a spot for you in the accounting department," my father offered, as if he were bestowing a great honor. I left the next morning before anyone else was awake. For the next 7 years, my connection to my family dwindled to sporadic calls with my mother and obligatory Christmas cards. They knew I was still in Boston, still in tech, but the details were a blur to them. I never offered up my growing success, and to be fair, they never really asked. Now, as I pulled up to the familiar house in a rented Ford sedan, I took a deep, steadying breath. My own car, a sleek Polestar, was tucked away in my garage back in Boston. There was no need to arrive in a vehicle that cost more than most houses in this town. I had intentionally toned down my entire appearance. My designer clothes were replaced with a simple sweater and jeans. The only luxury I couldn't part with was my watch, a quiet gift to myself when we hit our first 1,000,000 users. But even that was easily hidden beneath my sleeve. This Christmas dinner was my attempt at a bridge, a way to show my family who I had become, in spite of their lack of faith. I just had no idea how explosive that revelation would be. The house looked exactly as it always did for the holidays, a perfect picture postcard. Multicolored lights traced the roofline and windows, a massive wreath adorned the front door, and I could see the soft, warm glow of the Christmas tree through the living room window. For a fleeting moment, I felt like a teenager again, coming home from school to the comforting aroma of my mother's cooking. I paused on the doorstep, hesitating before ringing the bell. 7 years was a long time to be estranged. Would they even see the person I was now? Would I fit in any better? My mother, Helen, answered the door, her face instantly lighting up. "Clara, you made it." She enveloped me in a tight hug, and the familiar scent of her perfume triggered a flood of memories. Come in, everyone's already here." Everyone indeed. As I stepped into the living room, a sea of familiar faces turned my way. My brothers, Victor and Graham, stood by the fireplace, drinks in hand. Victor's wife, Isabella, was arranging gifts under the tree, while their kids, Leo and Mia, now 14 and 12, were glued to their phones. Graham's wife, Olivia, was in a deep chat with Aunt Carol, my father's sister, while their 16-year-old son, Noah, was slouched in a corner, completely absorbed in his own smartphone. Uncle Robert, Aunt Carol's husband, was watching a football game with Uncle James and Aunt Patricia, my mother's brother and his wife. And there, in his customary armchair, like a king on his throne, sat my father. He looked older than I remembered, his hair now almost entirely silver, but his posture was as commanding as ever, his gaze sharp and penetrating as he sized me up. "Clara," he said, a simple nod of acknowledgement. Not a hug, not even a shift in his seat. Just my name, spoken like a statement of fact. "Hi, Dad," I replied, my tone just as neutral. "Merry Christmas." Victor was the first to approach, giving me an awkward, one-armed hug. "Welcome home, sis. Boston treating you well?" "It is," I said simply. "Still doing that app thing?" Graham chimed in, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Something like that," I answered vaguely. "Well, the family business is booming," Victor pressed on. "We just expanded to 3 new states last quarter. Dad put me in charge of operations across the entire East Coast. And I'm handling all our major client accounts now," Graham added, puffing out his chest. "Revenue is up 37% year over year." The pattern was so familiar it was almost a caricature. My brothers jockeying for position, establishing their success, desperate for our father's approval. I just smiled and offered a simple, "Congratulations." "And what about you, Clara?" My father finally spoke up from his chair. "Did that little startup of yours ever actually get off the ground?" Before I could formulate a response, my mother swooped in. "Dinner's almost ready." "Clara, dear, would you mind helping me in the kitchen?" I followed her gratefully, escaping the interrogation. The kitchen was a warm, fragrant haven of roast turkey, stuffing, and baking pies. My mother had always been a phenomenal cook, and Christmas dinner was her symphony. "I'm so glad you came," she said, handing me a stack of plates. "Your father would never admit it, but he's missed you." I sincerely doubted that, but I just nodded. "How have you been, Mom?" "Really?" She paused, her hand stilling over a bowl of mashed potatoes. "Oh, you know. Busy. The boys bring the grandchildren over often. Victor and Graham are at the house almost every day for meetings with your father." She lowered her voice. "I do wish you'd call more." A pang of guilt hit me. I know. I should have. "Are you happy out there in Boston? Is there someone special in your life?" The genuine concern in her voice made me regret the distance I'd kept. "I am happy, Mom. My work is all-consuming, but I love what I do. No one's serious right now, but that's okay." She squeezed my arm gently. "As long as you're happy, that's all that matters." If only my father felt the same way. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a space reserved for holidays and major occasions. The long table was set with the good china, crystal glasses, and silverware that had been in the family for generations. I found my assigned seat between Aunt Carol and my niece, Mia, directly across the table from my father. The meal began with my father's traditional Christmas prayer, in which he thanked God for family, prosperity, and another banner year for Mayfield's sons. I noticed he made no mention of my return. Conversation swirled around me, a carefully choreographed dance around any potentially controversial topics. It was all sports, the kids' school activities, local gossip, anything but politics or personal issues that might crack the pristine facade of family harmony. I tried to make conversation with my niece and nephew. Mia was in middle school and had developed a keen interest in science. Leo was in high school, focused on basketball and starting to think about colleges. Noah, Graham's son, barely looked up from his phone, even when his parents spoke to him. "What are you so obsessed with over there?" Graham finally snapped. "Research," Noah mumbled, not looking up. "Put that away during dinner," Olivia, his mother, instructed. Noah reluctantly slid the phone into his pocket, though I saw him sneak glances at it every few minutes. "So, Clara," Aunt Carol said, turning to me, "Helen tells me you have your own business now. What is it exactly that you do?" Every head at the table turned in my direction. I felt the familiar pressure to shrink myself, to downplay my accomplishments to avoid ruffling my brother's feathers or irking my father. I founded a healthcare technology company, I explained, keeping it as simple as possible. We build software that helps hospitals and surgeons provide better patient care. That sounds wonderful, Aunt Carol replied with genuine interest. Is it doing well? I could feel my father's gaze intensify from the other end of the table. We're making progress, I said diplomatically. Victor let out a short, condescending laugh. Tech startups burn through investor cash for years before they see a dime of profit, if they ever do. Meanwhile, fine craftsmanship and manufacturing continue to be the backbone of this country. The family business just had its best quarter in history, my father added, his voice swelling with pride. Your brothers have truly taken it to the next level. And there it was, the inevitable pivot back to the family business, to my brother's success, the unmistakable message about what kind of achievement was deemed worthy in this house. I helped my mother and Isabella clear the plates after the main course, grateful for the brief escape. In the kitchen, Isabella surprised me with a sincere question. What's it really like running your own company? She asked quietly. Victor never talks much about the business side of things. I hesitated, then decided to be candid. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Non-stop pressure, impossible decisions, sleepless nights. But when you're building something you truly believe in, something that can actually help people, it's worth it. She nodded, a thoughtful look on her face. That sounds more fulfilling than just continuing something someone else started. Before I could respond, my mother called out that it was time for dessert. As we returned to the dining room with pies and coffee, I saw my father tapping his water glass with a spoon, the traditional signal that an important announcement was coming. I had no idea that this one would change everything. The room fell silent as my father stood at the head of the table, commanding the space as he always had. He was wearing his favorite cashmere sweater, reserved for special occasions, and his expression was grave. Before we enjoy Helen's wonderful desserts, I have an important announcement to make, he began, his voice carrying that familiar, authoritative weight. As you all know, Mayfield Sons has been growing steadily, thanks in large part to the exceptional work of Victor and Graham. My brother sat up a little straighter, basking in the public praise. Victor's wife, Isabella, beamed with pride, while Graham's wife, Olivia, gave a knowing nod. We have recently acquired our biggest competitor in New England, expanding our operations significantly, my father continued. This makes us the largest custom furniture manufacturer in 5 states, with plans to expand further in the coming year. Murmurs of approval went around the table. Uncle Robert raised his glass in a silent toast. With this growth comes the need for clear succession planning. I'm not getting any younger, he said with a slight chuckle, which was dutifully echoed by the family. So after careful consideration and many discussions with our family attorney, I have made some final decisions about the future of the company and our family's assets. I took a slow sip of water, already knowing where this was headed. Victor will take over as CEO upon my retirement next year, my father announced. His financial acumen and operational expertise make him the natural choice to lead the company forward. Victor nodded solemnly, accepting his long-expected coronation with practiced humility. Graham will serve as president, overseeing all client relationships and new business development, areas where he has already proven himself to be exceptional. Graham grinned, raising his glass to our father. Together, they will guide Mayfield Sons into the next generation, preserving and building upon the legacy I have created. The table erupted in congratulations. Aunt Carol patted Victor's hand, while Uncle James clapped Graham on the back. My mother smiled proudly, though I caught her glancing my way with a flicker of concern. My father cleared his throat and the room quieted once more. His gaze locked onto me. As for the matter of inheritance, he continued, his tone hardening slightly. "I have decided to revise my will to reflect the contributions made to the family business." Here it comes, I thought, keeping my expression perfectly neutral. "Victor and Graham will inherit equal shares of the company and the majority of our family assets," he stated flatly. Then, looking directly at me, he delivered the blow. "Clara, you will not be receiving an inheritance." Even though I had expected it, hearing the words spoken so bluntly, so publicly, still stung. The air was thick with a collective, unspoken gasp. My father pressed on, his tone matter of fact. "Victor and Graham have dedicated their lives to building what I started. They deserve to inherit it." I held his gaze, my composure unshakable. 7 years ago, this would have shattered me. It would have drawn tears or anger or both, but I was no longer that girl desperate for validation from a man who refused to see her. "I understand," I said calmly, picked up my fork and took a bite of apple pie. The flavors barely registered as I focused all my energy on maintaining my dignity. The tension around the table was a physical thing. My mother's face had gone white, her hands twisting her napkin in her lap. Graham looked deeply uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and avoiding my eyes. Victor, however, wore an expression of poorly concealed triumph. It was Aunt Carol who broke the strained silence. "Arthur, is that really necessary? To announce this at Christmas dinner, of all times?" Her disapproving tone suggested it was the timing, not the decision, that she found distasteful. "Family business should be discussed with family present," my father retorted, sitting back down with an air of finality. "Now, let's have dessert." Conversation slowly flickered back to life, but it was muted, forced. I focused on my pie, acutely aware of the pitying or curious glances being sent my way. As I sat there, a flood of memories washed over me, begging for help with tuition, the dismissal of my career, the constant draining comparisons to my brothers, the endless messages, both subtle and overt, that as a daughter, I was simply less valuable. But beneath the familiar sting of old wounds, there was a strange, liberating sense of peace. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his money. I had built my own world on my own terms, something he could never touch. "Are you okay?" My niece Mia whispered beside me, her 12-year-old face etched with concern. I gave her a genuine smile. "I'm perfectly fine, sweetie. Sometimes grown-ups are just complicated." She nodded with a wisdom beyond her years. "Grandpa can be really old-fashioned." From the mouths of babes. I was just contemplating the earliest possible moment I could politely escape when Noah, who had retrieved his phone the second my father's speech ended, let out a loud, sharp gasp. His reaction was so sudden that all conversation stopped dead. "No way! Aunt Clara is on the Forbes billionaire list," he exclaimed, his voice cracking as he stared at his phone in utter disbelief. The room went silent again, but this was a different kind of silence, one filled with stunned confusion. "What are you talking about, Noah?" Graham asked his son, frowning. "It must be a different Clara Mayfield," Victor said dismissively. "Forbes just put out their annual list, and he's probably just confused." Noah shook his head wildly. "No, it's her. It's definitely her. Look!" He turned his phone around, showing the screen to the people nearest him. "It has her picture and everything." My heart started to race. The Forbes list. It had gone live that morning. My PR team had warned me, despite my pleas for privacy. The acquisition of my company had been finalized last month, and the details were now public record. "Let me see that," my father demanded, his voice raspy as he held out his hand. Noah got up and carried the phone over to his grandfather. I watched as my father's expression shifted from skepticism to utter shock. His face drained of all color as he stared at the screen. This says you're worth $2.8 billion, he said, his voice a hoarse whisper as he looked up at me. "That you founded Innovate Med, which was just acquired by Omnicorp. every single eye in the room was now fixed on me. I took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. "Yes," I confirmed, my voice steady and clear. "That's correct." The room erupted. A chaotic jumble of questions and exclamations flew across the table. $2.8 billion? You sold your company? Why didn't you tell us? You're a billionaire. I raised my hand slightly, and to my astonishment, the room quieted. Maybe wealth did command a certain kind of respect, even here. I founded Innovate Med 7 years ago, I explained calmly. We developed an artificial intelligence platform that helps surgeons predict and improve patient outcomes in complex procedures. Last month, we were acquired by Omnicorp in a cash and stock deal. But why didn't you tell us? My mother asked, her voice small and bewildered. I looked at her, my expression softening. Because I wanted to be seen for who I am, not for what I have. When I left 7 years ago, it was made very clear that my path wasn't valued or understood here. I needed to prove to myself that I could succeed on my own terms. Victor's face was a blotchy red. So all this time, while we thought you were struggling with some little app, you were becoming a billionaire. It wasn't overnight, I clarified. The first 3 years were hell. We almost went bankrupt twice. I lived in a tiny apartment and poured every cent I had back into the company. The breakthrough came 4 years ago, when our algorithm correctly predicted a complication that saved a patient's life during a clinical trial. After that, hospitals started signing on. "You could have shared your success with us," my father said, a strange, wounded tone in his voice. I met his gaze directly. "Would it have made a difference, Dad?" "You made it perfectly clear that the only business you respected was the one you built. The only success you valued was the kind Victor and Graham achieved by following your path." The uncomfortable truth hung in the air. Olivia, Graham's wife, broke the tension with a practical question. "So what does your company actually do, in simple terms?" I was grateful for the redirect. "Our AI analyzes millions of surgical records, medical journals, and patient data points to identify risks and suggest optimal approaches for surgeons. It helps them make better decisions in real time. We started in neurosurgery, but have expanded to cardiology and oncology. The platform is now used in over 2,000 hospitals worldwide." "That's actually incredible," Graham admitted, looking genuinely humbled. "So that's why you were researching her company," Olivia said to Noah, the pieces clicking into place. Noah nodded eagerly. "I've been following Innovate Med for a school project on AI. I just had no idea until today that Aunt Clara was the founder. When the acquisition news broke this morning, her name and picture were on all the tech sites. Then Forbes updated their list. $2.8 billion, my father repeated, still looking dazed. "And I just told you you're not getting an inheritance." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. "I think I'm doing okay without it," I said with a small smile. Victor, ever the opportunist, was already shifting gears. "We should talk about collaborations. The manufacturing sector could benefit tremendously from AI solutions for logistics and design. I'm sure Clara has better things to do than help out the family business now," Aunt Carol interjected, giving me a knowing look. She'd always been the most perceptive one. My mother had tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "I always knew you were special." Did she? Or was this pride a new development? Either way, I appreciated the sentiment. "Why did you come here in a rented Ford if you're so rich?" Leo asked with the bluntness only a teenager possesses. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. I didn't want to make a big entrance. I didn't want everyone to treat me differently because of money. I just wanted to reconnect as Clara. "Well, that worked out well," Graham commented wryly, but there was a hint of humor in his voice. The entire dynamic had been upended. My father seemed to have shrunk in his chair. Victor was visibly recalculating, the gears in his head turning as he reassessed my potential value to him. Graham looked genuinely interested, perhaps seeing me as a person for the first time. But it was the expressions on the faces of the youngest generation that gave me the most hope. Mia was looking at me with wide-eyed awe, while Leo and Noah were firing off questions about tech and entrepreneurship, their curiosity real and unfiltered. As the initial shock subsided, I found myself holding court, describing the early lean years of my company to a captive audience of my aunts and uncles. Through it all, my father remained uncharacteristically silent, his eyes fixed on me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Regret? Reassessment? Or was he just calculating what my new status meant for him and his precious legacy? I knew we would need to talk privately before the night was over. The ground beneath our feet had shifted, but money alone couldn't heal years of emotional neglect. That would require something far more valuable. As I finished explaining our global expansion to Uncle James, I saw my father quietly get up and walk toward his study. Our eyes met, and he gave a slight tilt of his head, an unspoken invitation. It was time for a conversation that was 7 years overdue. The atmosphere in the house had completely transformed. Where there had been stilted formality, there was now a genuine buzz of excitement. Victor intercepted me as I headed for the study. "Clara, we really should discuss those business opportunities," he said, his tone now dripping with respect. "Our processes could be so much more efficient with AI." "Maybe another time, Victor," I replied politely. "I think Dad wants to talk." Of course," he backpedaled. "But before you leave town, let's set aside some time for strategy." I gave a non-committal smile and proceeded to the study, a room I had always associated with being in trouble. Today, it felt different. I was entering not as a supplicant daughter, but as an equal. The study was unchanged. Dark walnut bookshelves filled with business texts and photos of my brother's achievements, the massive mahogany desk, and behind it, my father looking strangely uncertain. "Close the door," he said. It wasn't quite a command, but not a request either. I did, and sat in one of the leather chairs facing him, crossing my legs. "You wanted to see me." He cleared his throat. "I believe we have some things to discuss." "We do," I agreed, waiting. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. "What you've accomplished, it's impressive," he began, the word feeling inadequate even to him. Building a company of that scale, especially in a field like technology, is no small thing. "Thank you," I said. He shifted in his chair, about what I said earlier and about the inheritance. "Dad," I interrupted gently, "I don't need your money. I didn't come here today expecting anything. That's not why I'm here." "Then why did you come?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. After 7 years, this was the real question. "I came because, despite everything, you're still my father, and this is my family," I said. "I came hoping that maybe time had changed things, that we might find a way to have a relationship based on respect, not on me conforming to your expectations." He looked down at his weathered hands. "I have always respected you, Clara." "Have you?" I challenged, my voice even. "You dismissed my education. You belittled my career. You made it clear that the only respectable path was the one you laid out for my brothers, a path that was never even offered to me, because I'm a woman." He flinched. "Times were different. I was trying to protect you." "From what? Success? Independence? The chance to build something?" "From failure," he said forcefully. "The business world is brutal. 9 out of 10 startups fail. I didn't want to see you get hurt." "But you were okay with me getting hurt by your lack of support?" I countered. "By being told my dreams were a hobby? By being excluded from my own family's legacy?" He had no answer. For perhaps the first time, he seemed to be truly reflecting. "I built my company with no help from anyone," he finally mumbled. And you thought I should do the same, I finished for him. And I did. But there's a world of difference between giving someone space to succeed and actively dismissing their potential. We sat in silence, the weight of unspoken history heavy in the room. I am proud of what you've done, he said eventually, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. I should have said that a long time ago. Thank you, I replied, recognizing the effort it took. But this isn't just about my success. If I had come here tonight having built a small company worth a few $1 million instead of a few billion, would we be having this conversation? Would you be reconsidering anything? His silence was the only answer I needed. That's the problem, I continued softly. Your approval has always been conditional on a specific type of success. That's not how family is supposed to work. In that moment, he looked older and more fragile than I had ever seen him. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted, an unprecedented confession of fallibility. Neither do I entirely, I said honestly, but admitting there's something to fix is a start. I don't expect us to change overnight, but I'd like to try to build a different kind of relationship. What would that look like? He asked with genuine curiosity. It would start with you seeing me for who I am, not who you wanted me to be, I explained. It would mean showing interest in my work because it matters to me, not because of its price tag. It would mean acknowledging that there are many ways to live a meaningful life, not just the one you chose. He nodded slowly. I can try. That's all I'm asking, I said, and I'll try too. There was something else. I've established a scholarship fund at my old high school in Mr. Davies' name, I told him. It provides full tuition for young women going into STEM fields. He looked surprised. That's very generous. It's personal, I corrected. Mr. Davies believed in me when you didn't. I want to make sure other girls have that support, whether they get it at home or not. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. He nodded, understanding. As I got up to leave, he called my name. Clara. I turned. He was standing now, looking hesitant. I'm sorry, he said, the words clumsy but sincere, for not seeing you. For making you feel less than your brothers. You deserved better. It was too little, too late, and yet somehow it was enough. It was a beginning. Thank you, Dad, I said, and left his study feeling lighter than I had in a decade. When I re-entered the living room, the atmosphere was completely different. My mother pulled me aside into the kitchen. I owe you an apology, too, she said, her voice trembling. I should have stood up for you. When your father dismissed your dreams, when he refused to help with college. I stayed silent. I was raised to believe a wife supports her husband, but my silence came at your expense. I am so sorry. Her candor stunned me. I was always so proud of you, she continued, tears welling in her eyes. Your determination. When you left for Boston all by yourself, I was terrified, but I was also in awe. I never said it loud enough. She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick, worn folder. Inside were dozens of printed out articles, press releases, and small news clippings. I've been following you all along, she confessed. Your father never knew. This secret archive of her silent support touched me more deeply than any public declaration could have. Later, Graham pulled me aside onto the back porch. I've been a terrible brother, he said without preamble. I just went along with Dad, enjoyed the favoritism, and never once stopped to think about how it must have felt for you. The truth is, I've always been a little in awe of your courage. To just go and build something from scratch like that? It takes guts. His sincerity was a balm on old wounds. We talked for a while about his son, Noah, who was brilliant with computers. He takes after his aunt, I think, Graham said with a proud smile. I offered to talk to Noah, to connect him with people at my company, an offer he accepted with overwhelming gratitude. As the evening wound down, I found my niece, Mia, showing her a coding tutorial I thought she'd like. her eyes wide with excitement. Noah found me, bubbling with questions about machine learning, and I offered him a summer internship on the spot. Even Victor, after his initial transactional approach, seemed to have developed a grudging respect. The change was palpable. Just as the evening was drawing to a close, my phone rang. It was Jessica, my COO. "Clara, sorry to bother you, but we have a fire. The Omnicorp engineers pushed a code change without proper testing, and 3 major hospital systems are reporting critical failures." I immediately shifted into work mode. Patient impact? Not yet, but we need to roll it back now, and their CTO is pushing back. We need your authority. "I'll be on a video call in 20 minutes, I said, and hung up. I explained the emergency to my mother, who was nothing but understanding. As I said my goodbyes, they were a world away from the tense greetings hours before. There were real hugs, respectful handshakes, and from my father, a brief, awkward embrace. "We'll talk more," he promised. As I drove away, I reflected on the whirlwind of the last few hours. My success had been the catalyst, but it wasn't the cure. The real healing had only just begun. 1 year later, I was driving that same road to my childhood home. This time, I was in my own car, no longer feeling the need to hide. The anxiety from the previous year was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. So much had changed. My father had started seeing a therapist. He called me regularly, asking thoughtful questions about my work. My brothers had implemented a diversity program at Mayfield Sons and appointed my mother to the board of directors. The house was already full when I arrived. Inside, my 2 worlds had merged. Jessica, my COO, was chatting with Graham about AI. 2 of my top female engineers were showing Mia their latest project on a laptop. Noah was deep in conversation with our head of data science, who had become his mentor. The seating at dinner was different, too. My father and mother sat side by side in the middle of the table, the throne at the head of it conspicuously empty. After the main course, my father stood up. "I have an announcement," he said, his voice warm. "This year, Mayfield Sons is launching the Mayfield Genesis Fund, dedicated to supporting women entrepreneurs in technology and manufacturing. The fund will be led by a board consisting of Helen, Clara, and a rotating seat for the women in our family, starting with Mia when she turns 18. I was speechless. He continued, "We will also be establishing the Davies Scholarship, funding the full college education for 5 young women pursuing STEM or business degrees each year." I caught my mother's eye, and she was beaming. Later, in the backyard, my father and I stood watching the stars. "I used to think legacy was about preserving what I built," he said quietly, "but I realize now, true legacy is about passing on the values that allow the next generation to build something even better, something you could never have imagined yourself." Inside, the house was filled with laughter. As I looked at my family, the one I was born into and the one I had built, I felt a profound sense of contentment. If you are watching this and have ever felt like your worth was questioned or your path was dismissed by your family, I hope my story brings you some comfort. Remember that your value comes from within, not from anyone else's approval. Your journey might not be understood by those closest to you, but that doesn't make it any less worthy. Have you ever had to prove yourself to people who doubted you, or found peace after years of misunderstanding? I would love to read your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their own unconventional path can lead to incredible places. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to build our own world, especially when no one else can see the blueprint. End of story.